Welcome and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Water Connections webinar series. I'm your host, Richard Restuccia, and I am really thrilled today to have Tanner Holt as our guest today. And let me tell you why. So first of all, Tanner's, first thing I know, he's a father, and that's first and foremost in his mind, but he's also a grower in Southern Utah, managing about 100 center pivots. You can just imagine how much water that is that he's responsible to manage over season after season. Tanner's been doing it a long time. And one thing I've noticed about talking with Tanner is that he's very committed to sustainability and water conservation. And he's this next generation of growers that we're looking to for real leadership there. And he is really taking a leadership position. You're going to be very interested in some of the comments he makes today about water conservation and sustainability. Tanner, thank you for joining us today and sharing your experience and your forward thinking on this subject.
Oh, thank you, Richard.
So, Tanner, the first question I just wanted to ask you, give everybody a little perspective on a little bit about your family farm, how it's got started, and what makes it unique today.
Yeah, so 59 years ago, Grandpa started with nothing but a loan from his uncle and 50 acres. He started growing potatoes just a mile from where we're at right now. Grandpa developed farmland, rented farmland, and became quite a large potato producer. I've worked a lot with Frito-Lay, so that's how the farm started. My dad, initially, Grandma would drive the planter, Grandpa would ride it, and they'd check on my dad at the end of the rows every pass. So that's how it started out. Over the next few years, he grew, developed those relationships, and became one of Frito-Lay's larger suppliers. So in the early 90s, the potato market started to fall out, and we started growing a lot more alfalfa. And as I came along, that was more of what it was. I have very few memories of the big potato harvest. So we did a lot of alfalfa when I was growing up, baled alfalfa, shipped some in the form of cubes overseas. And then about 15 years ago, while I was on my church mission, the family decided to start a dairy. So we start up the dairy. We have a feedlot, and now we grow stuff for cows to eat.
So I think there's a little bit more of a story there too. Didn't you suggest to your dad at one point that you get in the dairy business?
So ironically, my dad's a first generation dairyman, but I'm a fifth generation dairyman because my mom's side, they had a dairy. My grandpa Little had a dairy up in northern Utah. And I remember as a kid asking my dad, why don't we have a dairy? And he'd say, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. You realize with cows, they poop all over. You have to take care of them every day, milk them twice a day. You really want to do that every day all winter? So yeah, when I got the email that we were doing that, I reminded him of what he had said, but my influence was small, and it's good. We're a lot better off with this vertical integration.
Yeah. So tell me what changed his mind, or what got him thinking in this direction.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, with alfalfa, which is what we primarily produced, all alfalfa is going to go through a bovine. A limited amount can go to a horse, but everything's going to go to a cow in order to be productive. And so you can either pack that in a bale and ship tons and tons of alfalfa into California or Texas and pay the freight for that, or you can feed your own cows and ship gallons of milk we ship ours into Las Vegas, and it supplies that area. So with the vertical integration, we're able to capture that. We're able to have more diversification in our feed. We keep the compost and manure here, and it's really allowed us to kind of branch out instead of being a one-trick pony, where we have a lot of options on the table now.
Yeah, a great idea, right? That contained environment. So, as you mentioned, fifth generation dairy farmer. What are some of the lessons you've learned from those past generations that maybe you're still using today?
Oh, Grandpa, my dad, my uncles, they build it on hard work. There's no doubt that's the primary thing. When the job needs to get done, they always got it done. They expect us to do the same. And So that's more than anything that, but all of them, grandpa, my dad would look ahead. Is there a better way to do this? Whether it's water, whether it's machinery, whether it's dealing with people. My dad especially was always good at saying, "Hey, am I doing something wrong? Can I change?" And he looked at change and as an opportunity to improve rather than a punishment to accept. So those are probably the biggest lessons: to work hard and to embrace improvement and to get it done.
Yeah, those are pretty good lessons right there. Pretty good lessons to follow everybody's life by, right?
Yeah,
So you went to college, you studied accounting,
I did.
and then came back to the farm at some point. Are there any, anything that you learned about accounting or any practices you use in accounting that have changed the way you farm?
Yeah, so accounting's a language of business, and we use it all the time. I worked for a little bit at an accounting firm doing taxes. Then I did some corporate accounting for a couple of years, became a CPA. And ironically, you'd think the accounting firms are most accounting, and then the corporate is a little less, and then the farm's less, and it's kind of backwards. When I'm filling out tax forms, it's pretty clear. I have to do this. When I'm at corporate accounting, there's a little bit looking more at the business as a whole. But now that I'm on the farm, there's no set way of how to do it. So you have to pull in all the different aspects of stuff you learned and create your own system. And there's times that I look at it and say, hey, this system's not doing a good enough job here or there, and we'll revamp it. But you really need to understand the entire process in order to have accurate accounting. And it's helped us a lot. We've changed some decisions and we've confirmed others because of our accounting.
Yeah, well, the growers I know are some of the best business people I know, right? And as you mentioned,
Mhm.
it's the language of business. Now, are there any weekly metrics or daily metrics you like to look at that other people could benefit from?
The dairy industry, and I'm more on the farm side than the dairy, but the dairy is very centered around the daily metrics. If the milk drops it all, we look at it. Hey, is it a different feed we added? Is there a heat stress? Is there something else causing that drop in production? And so they are very, very good at that. But it ties back to us on the farm, because if it is due to feed, why? My brother will call me up and we'll look at it. Oh, we changed what you're feeding in 2024. That field that you're now feeding was a little more mature, or maybe a little more of X or Y, and maybe that's responsible. And so, yes, the accounting kind of gives us the numbers, but then we also have to have that business knowledge to say, hey, what's the real problem here? And yeah, we do that on a daily basis. Every crop we go through, we analyze our yields. We use John Deere's yield management, yield monitoring technology, and we focus on the worst areas of the field. At the end of the day, we're putting on the same water on all the acres. It might be different for farmers in the Midwest where you take what you can get, but we use this yield monitoring, and we, with pivot irrigation, we're putting the same water, which is our scarce resource, on a part of the field that's yielding 5 ton as we are on a part of the field yielding 10 ton. So why is that part of the field not giving us back what we're putting into it? And we use that frequently.
Yeah, that's really interesting to have all that data available and be able to make decisions on it. It's probably very different than what your grandfather did, right?
Yeah, even grandpa and my dad they'd have to do it visually, but they'd note parts of the field that were weak, like any farmer. But it's awful nice when you have an acre, you know the acres on it, you know the difference, and you can identify what you need to do it. We even use satellite imagery through the year to identify it before harvest. And we'll haul compost, we'll haul fertilizer there. So as we go to rotate crops, we're ready to apply that, in the couple hours that are given us before we plant the next crop. So we try to do that in order to maximize production.
Yeah, excellent. So listen, I want to remind everybody that I have the Q&A open. So if you have some questions for Tanner, pop them in there and I'll ask when they're appropriate. So we're talking about accounting and we're talking about water today also. And the measurement of water and the use of water has been very controversial, right? There's been some places like California for many years, there was no reporting on water use for agriculture. Times are changing. I know you guys were on a use it or lose it proposition for a while, and you moved to something called the Roswell system. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, as a standard, that the system is you use it or lose it. Historically, that's the best way to track. It's the easiest way to allocate the water. But I mentioned that in the early 90s, we transitioned from potatoes to alfalfa. Alfalfa consumes more water than potatoes. And as the valley made that transition and as we've had drier winters, our aquifers suffered. And there's actually a groundwater management plan in place that will cut our available water over the next 100 years. It'll cut it in half. And so we've been fortunate to have great people in the state that are working with us and trying to solve the problem. And they looked elsewhere and other parts of the country that have issues. And one of those places is Roswell, New Mexico. And they had a plan that instead of use it or lose it, it gives the farmer more flexibility. It protects the state and the resources by reducing consumption and depletion. And so we've leaned heavily on that. The state's been good to work with us, and it's been a big change for how we look at water and how we look at production overall.
Yeah, it certainly makes a lot of sense to me to do it that way. Now, the thing that's resonating in my mind, I can't stop thinking about it, is half the water in 100 years. Now, when I think about where the population is going to be 100 years from now, that's a little scary. They expect that reduction, right? So, how do they expect growers to make that reduction?
Well, we're going to have to use any tool that we can. And the state, I mean, there's two sides of sustainability as well. There's sustainability as far as reducing consumption, but there's also the economic sustainability. And we've been fortunate to work with people who look at it that way. They're not just interested in, on the one side, they're trying to make it a win-win. And we're very fortunate to work with them. So we're looking at different crop types. We're looking at different methods of farming, LEPA irrigation, GMO plants that are bred or just traditionally bred plants that use less water. And this is where the dairy and the feedlot are great. When we were on the use or lose it, and any farmer on the use or lose it, it is about maximizing production per acre. And alfalfa is traditionally the way to do that. We grow great forage here. We grow great alfalfa. The dairies in California, the dairies in Texas love it. And so we grow it and ship it to them. But if we're looking at it as a value per drop of water, it changes the math a little bit and allows us to think outside the box and look at ways, maybe there's a crop that by the time you have the fixed costs of shipping and all that doesn't make sense to ship and export, but it does make sense to keep on site and feed your own cows and take care of that. Maybe grazing cows becomes possible under a variable rate water system. We grow a lot of triticale. It's a cross between alfalfa or between wheat and rye, and it uses about 25% of the water of alfalfa, but will give us half the value. So it's much more productive. So on a per acre basis, it's not attractive, but when we start looking at a per inch of water, it gives us a lot of value. Yeah. Anyway, so these are the ways we're looking at different methods of farming, no-till, etc. We're putting in conservation practices like LEPA irrigation. We're metering water, but we're also changing crop types and how we do business.
Yeah, that's great, Tanner. And I want to get more specific even into water. What are you guys doing now, to be more sustainable when it comes to water use, and how are you benefiting from that?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about LEPA. I don't know if the slide shows up. Is that what you're seeing, Richard?
Yeah, shows great.
So you'll notice that we've gone to this low evaporation precision application systems, and that puts the water down close to the ground. And we can debate to some extent what's consumed by a plant or not, but there's no debate that evaporation is water loss. And we're in an arid, I mentioned earlier, we're on the edge of the Mojave Desert. We're in an arid, dry climate. And we have seen significant gains with this LEPA system, with this low evaporation, low energy system. You'll see some of these pictures. They have a demonstration of the traditional watering versus our LEPA. And Texas A&M, Nebraska, they estimate the savings to be about 15%, and our data indicates similar, that the LEPA really does help conserve water, and it conserves it from pure loss, from evaporation loss.
Yeah, so let me ask you something. So I see where the emission devices are very low to the ground, and some are higher. Are these adjustable, or we're just seeing a comparison?
Um, so some of it is a comparison, but if you'll notice the top two pictures where it's a little higher,
Yeah,
what it is, the inside. So we put those nozzles are so small, they're putting out uh, so little water that we can't, on the inside of the pivot where there's less acreage, the nozzles are too small, and we have to do traditional there. Fortunately, that's a very small percent of the pivot, and this just kind of demonstrates the difference between the two systems. So we'll raise them up for corn when the corn gets tall, because the corn will be as tall as that pivot.
yeah.
But no, they're not necessarily adjustable. It's just the two different systems that we've integrated.
Right. So now, thanks to B-hyve Ag products, you can actually manage these pivots from your phone. Uh,
Yes, correct.
how has that changed what you're doing and how you do things?
Well, if water is a scarce resource, we need to manage it like the scarce resource. And B-hyve Ag has allowed us to control things remotely. This morning, one of the first things I did was check for problems, and we did have a problem on one of the pivots. So before I had my shoes on, we turned that pivot off. We were on the way to solve that problem. Without that, we had to, it could have been 2 or 3 hours later before the farm manager got to that field, realized there's a problem, and then fixed it. It'll allow us to turn on or off pivots in an instant. It takes 1 minute to turn off all 100 pivots. If a storm's coming in, or if it's a hot windy day, we'll turn them all off during that time, turn them back at night, so that we minimize loss there. It's really helped us manage everything overall.
Yeah, so before you had this ability, right? Because I talk about the technology of the center pivots a lot myself, and I say, well, you can turn them on and off from your phone, and it doesn't sound like great technology, but it's actually a huge labor savings, right? And if you didn't have that, how would you do it? How would you turn a pivot on and off?
Yeah, you just do it the old-fashioned way. Go to the middle of it, turn it off, or go to the power source and kill the power. And yeah, and it'd take a couple hours. So, for example, in the springs and falls when there's frost, we've realized if there's water on that within a few hours of the frost before the cold weather shutoff turns off the pivot, it causes problems for us. We can see a half-ton yield reduction because of the frost. Ironically, because we used too much water right there at that time. So back in the day, my dad would send me out, or all the farm managers would go and take about 2 hours or whatever to cross the valley to turn them all off, 2 hours the next morning to turn them all on. Now we just do it from our phones as we head home, or that night or whatever, and try to optimize that way.
Yeah, and I can imagine, we were talking about the monsoon rains that you get a lot during the summer. Uh,
Hmm.
if you had to make a decision to drive out and turn everyone off and then on again, or just let it run during the rain, there might be a lot of people making the decision to let it run while it rains, right? That would be
Yeah.
maybe a safer play, but you have the ability now to just take care of that.
I mean, one of the things in that situation, the pivot road's muddy, you can't even access the center of it.
Mm.
So yeah, this allows us to do it remotely, and it does. There's significant savings there.
Yeah. So, what else can you use the center pivot controllers for the technology?
That's a good question. We Some of the things we do as part of the Roswell plan, the state requires us to meter everything. Everything's metered and accounted for, uh, because it is allocated on a gallonage. And as part of that, we have to report every month to the state what our use was. Um, Now meters, they work good, but they do fail at times, especially after a thunderstorm. So our backup plan, if a meter goes out, is we take our last reading, and then we have to account for the water used since that last reading. And we pull up the B-hyve Ag, we look at the analytics, and we have a record, as you can see here, of when the pivot was on. And the state, we have to prove the pivot's off in order to not be charged for that water. They know how much that well produces, and if we want to claim some savings there. We prove that the pivot was not on. So you'll see on some of these, we're saying, hey, we know it was off for this many hours, so we didn't use water there, only charge us this amount. But then the metering too, we use the meters all the time to track it. And we're analyzing the crops, we're analyzing the production per drop and seeing what our yield is. And really this is all part of the system that allows us to, back to accounting, treat the scarce resource like the scarce resource. We've got plenty of land here in the desert. Water is a scarce resource. So the state's enabling us to manage around water instead of manage around land.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's tremendous. That's a lot of information at your fingertips. What other things can you use this technology for? Can you set application rates, things like that, programming, schedules?
Yep, we'll program it. We'll set schedules. We'll look at, every year on the farm we do test plots. You'll see this. We have some short corn, some tall corn. We'll go back to the B-hyve ag. We'll make sure that all parts of the field got the same amount of watering. We'll see how much water each part of the field got. We have several experiments that are set up around the idea of cutting back water on one section or another, seeing if a product pays that way. So yeah, we use all those tools to help maximize the efficiency of our water.
Yeah. Are there ever situations where you have to change the direction of a pivot?
All the time, yeah, especially in harvest. It's awful slick to be able to do it from your phone as you're operating, rather than go to the center, stop, wait for it to move it again. When you're doing it on the fly, it makes it awful slick. It saves time in crunch time. As we pull off the field, we'll start the pivot before we're even done with the field, get the production going again. We'll set up variable rate schedules at times. This morning as we were harvesting, there was a part of the field that was abnormally dry. We set a schedule in there to go over it 2 times, help catch that up. As much as we talk about water savings and water efficiency, the least efficient use of water seems to be poor crops, in our opinion. So, if 2 inches of water, for example, this last alfalfa crop used about 8 inches of water. There's a part that only got 6.5 inches of water, and the production was about half. And so you can see that extra 1.5 inches would have doubled production. So when we talk about efficient use of water, we got to know that, and we got to use it right.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? It doesn't necessarily mean savings reduction. It means applying the right amount to the crop at the right time to maximize the yields.
Correct. And with the Roswell plan, the state's allowed us to manage it instead of giving us, hey, use it or lose it. You guys manage it, you decide. So we can't use more water, but maybe we won't water a poor piece of ground, and we'll water a good piece of ground a little extra. Or maybe we'll plant a different crop there and maximize that. Under the use it or lose it, I remember a couple of years ago, we had a wetter summer and we had more water on hand than we anticipated going into late summer, and it was use it or lose it. So we planted a late crop of oats that barely paid. It used the water, and it barely paid for the inputs and the labor and everything to get it off. Under this plan, we would just save that. The next year we'd plan ahead. We would put that on some good ground instead of our off ground, and we would get a lot more value out of that.
Yeah, and so much more sustainable, right? And not
Yes.
producing the outputs of all the other factors of farming that you have.
Correct.
So yeah, I would think too then that this is a really great way to maximize any rainfall you get through the summer months as well.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, do we turn off pivots in the rain? And it depends. Sometimes the rainstorms, if it's not a big gully gusher, sometimes that's the best time to water because we're not losing anything to evaporation. And other times, those hot, windy, dry days that take the water, those are the best times to turn off, and we'll turn it on at night. But yeah, it's broadened our vision a lot. We take a lot more things into account. We're looking at seed varieties that are supposed to be a little more resilient. We're looking at different crops that should be a little more water efficient, even if they're not land efficient, and it's helping us out that way.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because a lot of people don't understand that the amount of rainfall you get doesn't necessarily match ET. So you might have to water with the rain sometimes. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. We got a question coming in from the audience, and the question is this: Tanner, can you mount these B-hyve controllers on any pivot, or does it have to be a certain manufacturer?
That's a great question. So part of when we looked at the B-hyve, to answer the question, yes, we can do it on about anything. But as we were looking at the number of pivots we had and the upgrades that other alternatives required, it was going to be cost prohibitive. And at the time, remember, we were just looking at it as kind of a convenience thing. We didn't have the Roswell plan. It was more of convenience, and to spend that much upfront on convenience was not going to happen. But B-hyve had a solution where they could retrofit it onto any pivot. And in this picture, it's on a valley pivot. We have it on Zomatic pivots. We have it on pivots that Grandpa put in 45 years ago. We literally have pivots that were put in the 80s, and B-hyve, I can access it from my phone just as much as I can access the brand new valley box that we put in this winter. So yeah, that's one of the great things about B-hyve.
Talk about sustainable growing. I mean, that is a really good use of expensive resource. I mean, I can't imagine what it costs to replace a pivot these days.
Yes, I mean the pivot and just to control that pivot's thousands of dollars, and to put a box on that does the exact same thing, it's great value.
Yeah. So, do you see more growers week by week, month by month, year by year adopting technology like this?
You know, in farming, you either adopt with the technology or you can be adopted out of farming, because you have to keep up. Productions increase exponentially over the last 50 years. You know, 100 bushels of corn per acre used to be great. I think the world record now is 728 bushels. Well, that wasn't on our farm, but that's just there's been a revolution with the fertilizers, with the nutrients. The corn breeders have just exploded, all crops, but corn especially. And so you have to adopt technology. There's equipment technology, there's seed technology, there's other technologies, and you have to adopt it, or else you're going to get left behind.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We've got a question from the audience. They're asking about subscription. So you have to connect to these controllers somehow, wirelessly, cellular. You can help us with that, and then do you pay a fee for that?
That's right. And we have a network across ours, so we don't access it by cellular, but I know B-hyve has that option. I've talked with our rep, and there's some of those that we will have in harder to reach places, but we have both options. We have it on a network. You can get it cellular, but when we looked at the fees, the B-hyve was just by far better, and where it's wireless, it just blows it out of the water. So,
Yeah.
and I don't know the pricing. That's something you'll have to answer, Richard, on everybody. But when we looked at it, it was much cost friendlier to go with B-hyve than the other options.
Yeah, yeah, and the B-hyve Ag is still a subscription-free service, so really nice advantage there for the grower. We've got
I think on the cellular, you have to pay if it's cellular, but when it's wireless like ours, I know we don't pay any fees with that annually.
Yeah, yep. And then we've got another question coming in about can you network in weather stations to each pivot to really create or measure the microclimate around each machine?
Yeah, you can. And I think you even have the options of which type of stations to put in. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, there's a lot of weather data that's accumulated for you, including Doppler and satellite. But you can use a local weather station too if you really want to dial it in tight.
And we use ours frequently. You mentioned the rainfalls earlier, and when the storm comes through, we'll check all over the valley wherever our pivots are and kind of get the scope of it. And we'll frequently see a half-inch, an inch difference on one farm versus another, and that changes our irrigation decisions. You know, as we check the weather, we'll turn off some of the pivots, we'll keep others on. We'll check the temperature. We check all that, and it is a great addition to the system.
Yeah, excellent. So Tanner, what looking forward now, right? Where I'm thinking still about that half the water in the next 100 years. Are there other things in the future of farming that get you excited about technology when you think about the future of farming?
New equipment's always fun to see and new tools are always cool, but one of the things that excites me the most is the potential science has to help us meet that need. We mentioned the necessary water cuts and that are going to happen inevitably and it's across the country. I know that in the Midwest they have issues, etc. But I know they're developing new plant varieties that take substantially less water. I heard of one a few years ago, and I don't know where they're to with this, but they took some of the genetics found in plants from the Chilean Atacama Desert, which receives it's the driest desert in the world, and they took some of the genetics from those plants and put it into corn. And what I read said that corn produced 80% of the yield with, and it went 60 days with no water.
Wow.
I might be wrong. Someone could probably, maybe I'm quoting that wrong, but that was the gist I got. That just the overwhelming potential they have. And is this, it's not just our area that has water shortages. And as that comes, these smart people in other industries are coming in. I'm excited to see what they can do, especially from a water standpoint, but from a yield standpoint overall. What can we do with less resources when we all work together like that?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see what's happening. It's exciting to see the grower community pull together and share ideas, and so many companies coming in from a technology standpoint and trying to solve this very real problem for all of us. So, in solving that problem, Tanner, some people think maybe some additional subsidies or help to get growers moving in this direction. I just wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
There's always an incentive, hey, pay a farmer not to grow, pay this or that. Really, what the Roswell plan to me demonstrates is, hey, as the government was forward thinking, as our leaders were helpful, they removed unnecessary regulations and allowed for a win-win situation. Now, we as producers, we don't need handouts as much as we need the ability to expound on what we have. And there's always a need for regulation. Don't get me wrong. There's a time and place to have these rules, but the Roswell plan demonstrates, hey, there's room for us to do better, for the aquifer to be better. Let's work with that. Let's work within these other rules that make us both better off. And so overall, I don't think we need subsidies as much as we need we need some common sense regulation. We need leaders like we have here. We're very fortunate to have leaders that look ahead, see a potential win-win, and help us achieve that. So
Yeah, well said. I've asked a lot of people that question, and that's probably the best answer I've heard on that. And what I agree strongly with. You guys are great business people. You're going to do what's right. Show me some technology, and then give me the ability to use it for the benefit of everybody. And you're going to do that.
yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, no one's more interested than us in what we're doing. My personal goal is to make sure my kids, if they want to, they can choose to farm. Uh, we know we have to be sustainable to do that. We know that we have to continue to progress, take technologies, whether it's beehive ag, whether it's a crop type here or there, we've got to move forward. And the more opportunities we have, the better we'll do. We don't need to be a cherry case. We just need the opportunity to do better, and we will. And we'll accept that challenge.
That is really exciting to hear, and it's really empowering, I think, for all the growers that are watching. So this photo is a photo of the next generation of growers, right?
Yep. Those are my two boys, and one of their favorite things to do is to come and check the corn as it's coming out of the ground. Results in a little yield loss here and there, but I think it's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, definitely. So, hey, I think you have a few more shots that we didn't get to. Maybe you can show us a few things that you're working
Oh,
on. Wow, look at that.
yeah, we talked about, a valid point. We talked about the benefits of technology. There's also times we have to be safe. So this was earlier this year, I was changing a pivot tire. And I had it all jacked up and I was trying to put the new tire on when one of our guys had the wrong pivot selected from his phone and he started moving the pivot on me. So I got out of there with minimal damage, but there's a good lesson. And in all reality, we looked at the problem and said, hey, is this my guy's fault? no, it's my fault. I should have disabled the power to the pivot. And B-hyve Ag has that feature. They have the lockout feature. If I'd have used it, we'd have been safe. But it does cause the need to look ahead. There's always a need to look ahead with any technology and see what could happen. So, um, yeah, that's one of them. We do tests on our farm every year, trying to find, hey, is there a good ROI product that we can put in, maximize production per inch, and different crop types. I think I told you earlier, we grow a lot of forage, but we're looking at different greens. A rye grain, a wheat. Is there something we can feed our cows that will help us maximize the resources we have? So, yeah, sorry, I clipped through those a few times, but that's kind of the story behind those pictures. I don't know if you have any other questions or not.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that last shot there in particular is quite beautiful. So
Yeah.
yeah, so Dan, I just want to say this has been fantastic. Thank you for being so generous and sharing your family story, as well as the information you supplied on smart water management for your farm, as well as other technology. I mean, this is a wealth of information you just supplied to everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Well, thanks, Richard. Thanks for giving us a chance to talk about what we do, and hopefully that it's beneficial to insiders and outsiders. So we love to learn from others as well, and hopefully we had something worthwhile for people.
Yeah, great. So I want to thank everybody too for joining us this afternoon. We know everyone's busy. It's summertime, and both ag and landscape is cranking right now. So thank you. Remember, you can see all our webinars for free at husqvarna-water.com. There's quite a few good ones there, and we'll be back in a couple weeks to talk more about water management at the next Water Connections webinar series. Tanner, thanks again. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate your time.
Okay. Bye now.